So beautiful. Okay.
The story of Port Arthur has been a place of hardship and punishment, a place of opportunity, and a place of leisure.
So we're gonna buy a ticket.
This is now one of the most important heritage
Another
destinations.
beautiful place. And Tassie southeast. Tassie southeast. And there's a cafe and bar and a ticket station. Huh? Yep. We're back again. This is our third time to come back here. Here, we're going to the jetty. Beautiful, beautiful place. See how clear the water is. Wow, it's very clear, really. See the forest down there. But all you can see is the glare of the water.
The Isle of Dead is a small island located in the Bay off Port Arthur. In 1883, it was selected as a burial place by the Reverend John Manton. According to Reverend Manton, this is a secure and undisturbed resting place where the prisoners might lie together until the morning of resurrection. Between 1833 and the closure of the penal settlement in 1877, some 1,100 burial took place. Even in the death, the strict order was maintained. Free people were buried in the highest part of the island. Their graves were marked by headstones that were carved by convict stonemason.
The majority of those, as you can imagine, are convicts, but to give them their proper status, convicts, the term means convicted person, invalids, there's a person who can't work properly because of illness or injury, and paupers, who are men who had grown old within the system and simply had nowhere else to go, no other means of support. And finally, lunatics. The term lunatic means you're off with the moon. In other words, you're suffering severe mental illness. They're all buried along that southern end, and there's not a great deal of evidence of that because it was policy at Port Arthur that convict graves should be anonymous. The thinking being a life which has been lived in shame and disgrace would deserve no lasting memorial. That idea was only relaxed somewhat in the 1850s when a convict was permitted to have a headstone, but somebody, of course, had to pay for it. Very few convict headstones on Isle of the Dead. Goes around the greater part of the harbour, out to the point where, of course, are quite prominent as well, and boys would scramble down those cliffs and gather on the rocks. The view, they would light fires, cook potatoes they'd stolen, catch fish, smoke tobacco. Thomas Lopierre, the commissariat here, stood on top of the cliff and looked down and said they scuffled away from the hands. Look towards Isle of the Dead once more and put an imaginary line down the centre of that. The left-hand side is the southern end, convicts, etc. The right-hand side of the island, the higher ground, was reserved for burial of free people. These were members of the military, civilian establishment, and members of their families. 180 men, women and children, and given their status, served to bury in a lot of cases some quite beautifully carved headstones as well. We'll be able to catch a glimpse of some of those as we go past. So two distinctly different cemeteries within the one island, high ground for the free, high ground for the bond. The small island was selected and named by Wesleyan minister, the Reverend John Manton, in 1833, who described it as a secure and undisturbed resting place for those departed prisoners who may lie together and await the morning of resurrection.
The worst bloody criminals that they could get that weren't rehabilitated, you know,
Yep.
they couldn't be trained or whatever.
Yep.
Multiple murderers and things like that, rapists, everything like that.
Yeah, even from England.
Port Arthur began as a small settlement in 1830. A penal settlement where select-wed convicts are provided with useful skill they could take once they are freed. Port Arthur holds many great stories. Like the flour mill and the granary, has become the penitentiary. It housed hundreds of convicts in dormitories and solitary cells. The penitentiary had 136 separate cells, 2 floors they called the Lion. Prisoners with bad characters under heavy sentence are separated from the better behaved. The penitentiary symbolizes the machine of reform at work, containing within itself both the machinery of punishment and of self-improvement. Prisoners could be reformed through psychological punishment, trade training, and religious education. Port Arthur was established as an industrial, self-sufficient settlement that relied on unpaid labor.
Oh, wow.
Some of the trades includes collecting timbers, shipbuilding, and shoemaking. Convicts also did iron casting, leatherworks, ceramics, and bricks. Gangs of convict laborers worked on surrounding farms as beasts of burden, plowing, hauling logs, and dragging carts. Of all the laborious occupation, convicts were forced to carry out, and the most punishing is getting timber. Trees were enormous. When the log is cut out, the centipede gang composed of 50 people will carry the log on their shoulder back to the settlement.
It's nice to come up here at night and go for a ghost tour. Michael Burns.
Leg iron were used as a form of punishment. They weigh 6 to 13 kilograms.
This must be an isolation rooms.
In 1830 to 1840s, men who were unmanageable or disruptive or had broken one of the many rules were sentenced to spend up to 21 days in separate cells behind the prisoner's barrack. They will be allowed each day for a short period of exercise and have to remain silent at all time. In later years, they will be accommodated in small cells in penitentiary in heavy irons.
The lavatory toilets and all that.
In 1851, the separate prison was opened. This represented a move away from physical punishment to focus on psychological punishment. It was known as the separate prison. Prisoners has to be strictly kept apart from each other. This meant they have separate cells, separate exercise yards, and separate cubicle in the chapel. Within the prison, there was total silence and solitude.
I wonder what's in there.
Convicts are not allowed to communicate with each other. When a prisoner left his cell, he had to wear a hood that came down over his face with slits for his eyes, so even he saw another prisoner, they won't recognize each other. If he broke any of many rules, he was further punished by being locked in a dark cell, in total darkness and silence. Prisoner could be locked up for between several hours to 30 days on bread and water. After 3 days, he will be taken for an hour exercise each day.
There's lots of things to do here, but
In the first 10 years, the settlement's strict regulations, for example, absconding, illegal possessing of tobacco or rum, hiding clothes, or refusing to do labor were punished by the lash. In keeping with the era, treatment for the patients, many suffering from depression and mental disability, was rudimentary at best. Convict patients was provided with a soothing atmosphere where they are allowed to exercise and mild amusement. Work, though limited, was mainly tending gardens or chopping firewoods.
I went in there before, but they closed it down. Oh, Rose Cottage.
The senior military officer is responsible for all the aspects of the military establishments at all the stations on the peninsula.
Oh, you can't go down.
Even though they were living within the prison, the senior officer enjoyed a cultured and varied social life. The commandant socialized with the senior officers. Commandant's Booth, for example, was great friends with the Lemprey Rays and spent many evenings with him. Booth also entertained regularly, celebrating events like Christmas, the 20th anniversary of his entering the army in July 1835. Men enjoyed hunting, excursions to other places on the peninsula on foot or horseback, swimming and fishing. Sometimes there were regattas, picnics, or cricket games. Many of the officers were amateur scientists, and they have made botanical collections, study the weather and the tides, or astronomy. On Sundays, the civilian officers and their family attended church, and later in the day, some of the families would take a walk together in the government's garden or to local beauty spots. Families would also get together for special events like birthdays. Some men and women are competent musicians or singers and entertain small parties in other homes. Women also enjoyed walks, swimming, and scientific studies, especially seaweed and fern collecting. But the isolation settlement must have been strongly felt as they were away from the company of their friends and family.
This is my third time to come here. My very first one is when I first came in here back 2012. And then we come back like 2016.
But the common soldier found life at Port Arthur almost as restricted as the convicts did. There was little relief from duty. The soldiers were to consider themselves at all times unguarded and be ready to act at moment's notice. The military were located next door to the Commandante house on high ground so they can defend themselves and look out door trouble. From the 1840s they were accommodated in the barracks. These were brick buildings located behind the guard tower. Their main responsibility is security. They watch convicts working in the bush, the stores, in the boats and on the docks, and they pursue escapees. A soldier's experience in Port Arthur depends on his rank. The senior officer and their families in Port Arthur had compensation of a busy social circle. They enjoyed dinner parties, literally evenings, and cricket matches. The commandant lived in a house that was built high on the hill, reflecting his high status, that the house was isolated by its location and a high brick wall, that it provides a degree of privacy and security for him and his family. The commandant's role changed during the occupation of the penal settlement. Originally, the commandant supervised the whole of the Tasman Peninsula, although he was not expected to interfere with the running of the probation station, which was the responsibility of the superintendent of each station. The commandant, however, would visit 3 stations to review security and to ensure efficiency in the farming in the peninsula. His other duty includes inspecting all buildings and the convicts weekly to see if they were clean, healthy, and orderly. The commandant's duties changed in 1839, as the lieutenant general restricted his duties to cover only Port Arthur and Point Pure, the police, the signal station of the peninsula. Most of the commandants were soldiers, and only one, James Boyd, had ever had any experience running a prison. The medical officer was responsible for the health of convicts and also treated the free people and the
This is the
soldiers.
ruins of
His
the
duty
ruins.
includes being in charge of the hospital,
that sandstone,
making weekly
I like
medical inspection of the convicts and daily inspections of men in solitary confinement. He also have to visit the convicts' living and working quarters at least once per week and check their beddings. When any flogging were carried out, the medical officer had to be present to ensure that no prisoner will be given a greater number of lash than he could stand, without danger to his life. The hospital was abandoned after Port Arthur closes down in 1877. It was eventually purchased by the Catholic Church and was converted into a boys' home. A bushfire gutted the building in 1895. The outer wall was remained strong and in good condition.
This is the doctor's quarters. Yeah, hospital.
The reconstructed bricks and footings at the rear of the building indicated the original extent of the rear wings. The ruins has now been stabilized and accessible to people.
And look at up here.
This building was the third hospital built at the settlement, and the wards were capable of housing about 70 patients.
Honeybee or killer one. The hornet, not the hornet. Is just wasp. There might be honeybee.
Please subscribe for more story.
See? Stop.
Up next, the asylum at the Port Arthur.
It's so nice. So good. Okay. Going home soon. Wow.